All right, guys, so we're going to see a huge change at the start of 2024, and millions of Americans are just not ready to face it. Now, we've already seen businesses function with just the bare minimum. I mean, we've seen it with the health crisis. We've seen it with places like Walmart, with Target, all these different retailers. They work with less staff and increased workloads. Now, there is this possible paradigm shift that could cause some of these practices to end up coming back. And I want to tell you guys that it may actually hit Americans where it hurts, all right? I'm talking about our wallets here. Now, the change for sure is going to leave a lasting impact on the lives of millions of Americans, whether or not you guys go to these places. Now, in this video, I'm going to show you why I believe that the rental market becomes wildly unpredictable with prices soaring and availability plummeting, leading to a new housing crisis. I'm also going to show you guys how the minimum wage hike leads to a double-edged sword: higher wages but increased living costs, causing a tug of war between workers and corporations. Now, if you guys appreciate the news updates, please take a second, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you own a home, make sure your home is protected. Be sure to get your free home warranty quote. There's a link in the description down below this video. It only takes about 10 seconds.
While our economy defied odds, despite rising inflation and cost of living increases, those who, of course, have lived on minimum wage have had a much harder time, paying rent, buying groceries, the essentials there. Campaigns like Fight for 15 have been advocating for higher minimum wage for more than a decade. And starting January of next year, close to 10 million workers across 22 states will have more money in their paychecks. And that's all thanks to a boost in minimum wage. Let's talk about this. More than half of those workers are in California, Hawaii, New York, all states where the cost of living is especially high. The pay bump will be massive for Maryland, Hawaii, and Nebraska. Pay also going up for their minimum wage workers by at least $1.50. Hawaii, $2. Despite this progress, though, there are still more than 17 million workers earning less than $15 an hour, and actually 20 states still use the federal minimum wage of $7.25. But there is good news for millions more workers. 3 more states plus DC are due to raise their minimum wage later on in the year.
All right, I'm going to tell you guys right now, there's 2 sides to this coin. Well, there's 2 sides to every coin. But anyway, so on the one hand, you got workers who basically want to be able to pay for the cost of living. Meanwhile, at the same time, work just one job. Now, on the other, you got businesses who are there to protect their shareholders as well as their profit margins. Now, they both have valid points, although not everyone can have what they want, right? So here's my question. How many of you guys think that these added costs will only be passed on to consumers? Comment a 1 if you think that you're probably going to end up paying for these wage increases indirectly, and comment 2 if you think that the prices will remain the same even though millions of workers will be getting better pay. Now, from changes to minimum wage and possible higher prices for American consumers, which we for sure will all be paying for, let's go ahead and talk about this huge issue that many homeowners are dealing with. It's an issue that some lawmakers are now taking notice of. So let me go ahead and paint the picture here, right? So a homeowner had a very huge problem with squatters. She was left with little to no choice, as the people who took over her home argued that they had every right to stay there, given that they had a lease. Now, take note of that tidbit because it's definitely going to play into how this story ends. Now, the owner was dumbfounded given that she never gave them a contract, although cops admitted that there wasn't much that they could do. So the story came out just a couple months ago, but just recently, and just like I said, legislation has now been introduced to try and stop instances like this that basically take away the rights of a homeowner to their own property.
I didn't have legal recourse. I didn't have policy recourse.
But that could soon be changing. Peoples took her story public, sharing it first with the I-Team. The story later went national, and eventually an aide of Pasco County State Representative Kevin Steele reached out.
I pursued this bill because I saw the impact that it had on Patty and as well as others in the state.
Peoples and her business partners sold this house back in June, but they say the months leading up to that cost them a lot. Between lost rent, attorney's fees, and damage done inside, they say the squatters cost them more than $50,000.
Representative Steele filed this bill in the State House in November. If passed, it would allow law enforcement to immediately remove squatters who can't produce a notarized lease signed by the landowner or records of paying rent.
Number 2, we're putting penalties on the individuals if they provide fraudulent documentation. So they're going to have criminal charges on that perspective.
Again, 2 sides to the coin here, guys. All right. So on the one side, you got people saying that they were scammed and they had to pay a deposit or rent to another person. And then when the owner shows up, then, well, this happened. They also lean on what's called tenants' rights when they can't even be removed from property, even though they don't own it. Now, just to add another bit of information here, the receipt that they showed, it looked fake as heck. The flip side is that the homeowners also need to have their rights when it comes to removing people who are in their property. I mean, they worked hard hard to buy these assets. And them not making money off of it or just having access to it is just insane. Were you guys aware that if the homeowner in this case tried to forcibly remove the people in her home, that she would be arrested instead? Isn't it just a weird rule to have? It almost pisses me off telling you about it. Which leads me to ask you guys, do you think that this legislation should be looked at the federal level? Because this is being introduced in Florida at the moment, although I'm pretty sure that other states also have their fair share of issues when it comes to squatters. Now, since we're talking about housing issues, we may see more of them pop up in 2024, especially when it comes to supply chain. All right, so picture this, okay? You go and get an apartment and they tell you that you can move in by February 2024, right? The problem is the developer of the tower that you're supposed to live in can't get your place connected to the power grid until the second quarter of 2024. And that's the optimistic timeline. This is exactly what's happening in downtown Oakland, where 19-story apartment tower that has 236 units is now having to push back its move-in dates by months. The developer, oh wow, actually put in an order for 3 subsurface distribution transformers in early December. But the company that they're going to be buying it from, PG&E, said that they're going to have to wait since there's an ongoing nationwide shortage on transformers at the moment.
Here's something you might not think about. Transformers, they're those big cylindrical things of utility poles, just like this, and they transfer energy from one circuit to another. When a big storm comes through, transformers can actually blow, and there's not enough of them to go around. Here's Liliana Pearson with more on that.
According to the American Public Power Association, a 2018 survey showed it would take a couple of weeks to get a new transformer where it needed to go. Their latest shows that wait time has changed drastically.
They are now upwards of a year, sometimes even longer, in order to procure.
There are only a handful of manufacturers stateside that build some of the parts required for transformers. The rest come from overseas. Ongoing issues with importation means in some instances prices has also jumped, with increases as much as 70% according to the National Association of Home Builders. Time, money, some orders aren't worth filling to the struggling manufacturers.
Oftentimes, manufacturers won't even take the orders if they're unable to fulfill them.
In a statement, CenterPoint Energy acknowledged the shortage, saying they're working with their operation teams daily to monitor supplies, and they're ready to call on mutual assistance for help if needed. With not enough new stock to go around, rented and refurbished transformers are being used more than ever.
One of the things they're doing is refurbishing their transformers. So rather than, a normal useful life of 20 years, we see them bringing them back in, bringing them to manufacturers and asking them to refurbish them in order to get more useful life out of them while they're waiting for the supply chain constraint to ideally abate.
So what does that mean, right? Well, it means that we're going to see a lot more of these problems soon, and it's probably going to make the housing market for 2024 that much more interesting to follow. But what are your thoughts on everything that we talked about today? Make sure you guys share them down below, and before I go, I want to thank you guys for hitting the like button. Thank you for subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next video.